Amtrak has been a vital part of American travel for decades, connecting cities and communities across the country. With ridership soaring and the need for rail travel increasing in a lot of regions that haven't been served by Amtrak, the need for an expansion is a must. However, it's not a piece of cake to complete this feat. Today, let's look at some problems that Amtrak is facing, as well as take a close look at all the current expansions that Amtrak is working on. Back when Amtrak was set up in 1970, they had a pretty clear way to get private railroads on board. Either hand over the passenger routes or keep running them yourself under orders from the Interstate Commerce Commission, ICC, until 1975. That mix of pressure and incentive helped Amtrak secure its early routes. The Passenger Service Act even gave the ICC backup power to deal with any railroads that didn't want to cooperate during future expansions. But things changed in 1976 when the 4R Act took that power away from the ICC. After that, Amtrak entered a rough patch with barely any new routes being added. It wasn't until 1996 that Congress stepped in again, realizing deregulation had gone too far. They created the Surface Transportation Board, STB, giving Amtrak a way to request access to new routes through a formal petition process. And in 2021, Amtrak released a bold and ambitious roadmap titled Amtrak Connects US, a vision to grow rail service across America. This wasn't just a promotional effort, it was a comprehensive national strategy aimed at expanding intercity passenger rail to serve millions more Americans over the following 15 years. At its core, the plan envisioned 30 new routes and the enhancement of over 20 existing ones, with the ultimate goal of bringing rail service to over 160 new communities and adding 20 million more annual passengers by 2035. Still, that doesn't mean the process is easy, and even now, Amtrak continues to face major hurdles in this area. So, what challenges are they dealing with today? We'll dive into that in the next part. But before we do, make sure to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any updates from our channel about the world of trains. Most people don't realize this, but over 70% of the tracks Amtrak runs on aren't even owned by Amtrak. They belong to big freight companies like Union Pacific, BNSF, and CSX, and that means Amtrak trains often have to wait around while slower freight trains get the green light. Even though there's a law that says passenger trains are supposed to get priority, it's not really enforced, and Amtrak ends up playing second fiddle more often than not. The delays are no joke. In 2024 alone, freight train interference caused more than 850,000 minutes of delays. That's over 590 days of people sitting and waiting just in 1 year. And it's not just a once-in-a-while thing, it's constant, especially on longer cross-country routes. One really bad example happened in 2022, when the Sunset Limited got held up 29 times in one trip because of freight traffic. That single ride ended up running 12 hours late. That kind of stuff makes it tough for people to take Amtrak seriously as a reliable way to travel. If the train's always late, it's hard to choose it over driving or flying, especially when it already takes longer. So, what's being done about it? Amtrak's trying a few different things. One is working out better schedules with the freight railroads. Sounds simple, but it's not. These companies are focused on shipping cargo, not moving passengers, so they're not exactly eager to make changes. Another big part of the problem, one of the most pressing issues, is the poor and aging infrastructure that underpins much of the existing rail system. Many key routes, especially in the Midwest and West, still rely on freight-owned tracks that were never designed for frequent or fast passenger service. These tracks are often subject to delays, lack modern signaling systems, and have outdated bridges and tunnels, some over a century old. Some of the rail infrastructure is really old. Take the B&P Tunnel in Baltimore. It's been in use for more than 150 years. It's small, outdated, and slows everything down. Combine that with sharing tracks with slow-moving freight trains, and it causes major backups, especially on busy routes like the Northeast Corridor. Now for the good news, Amtrak's starting to fix things. They're finally replacing the ancient B and P tunnel with a brand new one, the Frederick Douglass Tunnel. It'll have 2 modern tubes and handle both Amtrak and MARC trains. When it's done, trains will move faster and more reliably through Baltimore. In New Jersey, they're rebuilding the Sawtooth Bridges, which are more than a century old. Once that's finished, it'll double the number of daily trains and help out both Amtrak and NJ Transit. Over at New York Penn Station, they're planning to double train capacity, from 24 to 48 trains per hour. That's a big jump for one of the busiest stations in the country. And they're not stopping there. Amtrak's also working on upgrades across the board, installing new signals, overhead wires, and other tech to cut down on delays. One example is the Keystone Corridor between Philly and Harrisburg, where they're modernizing the system to make service smoother and more reliable. Even more exciting, Amtrak is looking to buy and build completely new passenger-only routes, especially in parts of the country that barely have train service today. That means better connections for more cities, and a step toward finally bringing America's rail network into the modern era. Let's be real, Amtrak doesn't survive on ticket sales alone. Ticket revenue typically covers only half or less of Amtrak's total operating and capital costs. The rest? It comes from federal and state governments, which provide the critical funding needed to keep trains running, maintain infrastructure, and support service expansion across the country. Historically, Amtrak's funding was unstable. Before 2015, most support came through year-to-year congressional appropriations, which made it nearly impossible to plan big infrastructure upgrades. That meant deferred maintenance, aging equipment, and outdated stations across the country. Things began to shift with the FAST Act of 2015, the first time Amtrak was included in a multi-year surface transportation bill. This provided more reliable funding and kicked off a new era of planning stability. A major turning point for rail funding came in 2021 with the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, IIJA, which allocated $66 billion for passenger rail, the largest federal rail investment since Amtrak's founding. This funding supports both the Northeast Corridor and underserved regions nationwide. In 2024, Amtrak also secured $126 million in CRISI grants for safety and infrastructure upgrades across several states. Meanwhile, programs like the Federal-State Partnership are driving critical NEC projects like the Portal North Bridge and the Gateway Program. States remain essential partners. California funds the Pacific Surfliner, while Washington and Oregon back the Cascades, ensuring key regional services continue to grow. Still, the system remains politically vulnerable. In 2025, the Trump administration launched a review of rail grants, which could delay or block key projects, like a proposed second daily train between Harrisburg and Pittsburgh. Further, under federal law, Amtrak requires states to share the cost of operating certain services that are under 750 miles in length. While some states have embraced this model and invested heavily, others have struggled to maintain consistent support. The Heartland Flyer highlights the funding challenges facing Amtrak's national network. The Heartland Flyer, linking Oklahoma City and Fort Worth, relies on annual state funding from Oklahoma and Texas. While Texas has remained supportive, Oklahoma has often debated its contribution, putting the route at risk. Proposals to extend service north to Kansas or south to Austin have stalled, largely due to the lack of multi-state funding agreements and long-term commitments. These cases show that without reliable state partnerships, even federally supported routes struggle to grow or survive. That kind of political effect makes it difficult for Amtrak and individual states to commit to long-term expansion plans. With all these upgrades underway, Amtrak is aiming to meet the growing demands of its passengers. But will it be enough? Drop a 1 if you think it's on the right track, or 0 if you're not convinced. Share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear what you think. Amtrak isn't just adding more trains, aiming for a full upgrade. A cleaner, smarter, and more sustainable rail system that can meet the demands of the 21st century. And that means tapping into technologies already shaping rail networks around the world. One of the biggest changes ahead is the move from diesel to electric power. Right now, most of Amtrak's long-distance routes still run on diesel locomotives. They're loud, expensive to maintain, and they burn a lot of fuel. Switching to electric trains helps Amtrak cut emissions, reduce noise, and lower costs, while supporting U.S. climate goals. Countries like France, Japan, and China have already made this shift. For example, nearly all of France's high-speed TGV network runs on electric power, much of it from low-carbon energy sources. Amtrak is already running electric trains like the Acela on the Northeast Corridor, but expanding electrification beyond that region is a key long-term target. Beyond running cleaner trains, Amtrak is investing in greener infrastructure. That includes solar panels at maintenance facilities, energy-efficient lighting and HVAC systems in new stations, and the use of eco-friendly materials in construction. Some of these stations are now aiming for LEED certification, a mark of sustainability in building design. You can already see this shift at major hubs. In New York, the new Moynihan Train Hall features sustainable materials and improved natural lighting. On the West Coast, the modernization of Los Angeles Union Station includes energy upgrades that reduce emissions while preserving historic architecture. That's a wrap for today. Thanks for joining us on Great Trainspeed. Hope you enjoyed the ride. See you in the next episode.